Nancy, this is a little different than our regularly scheduled programming. As you know, my company Shift Group, we help retired athletes and military veterans find their kind of new career, their new path, their new profession. So we typically have, retired athletes, retired veterans that have had success in business. And obviously this is a unique conversation that I'm very excited about.
Thank you.
So I think where it makes sense to start is kind of introducing yourself. Tell us a little bit about your professional background, and then obviously we can go right into, Pete and the Ice Bucket Challenge.
Sure. So I graduated Boston College a lot of years ago, and I was in the business school there and headed into the world of business, started in banking, ended up becoming an entrepreneur. Had some retail stores for a while. When you get to my age, you have to go through the chapters. And then I actually sold that business and became a real estate agent, which propelled me into business coaching. So after I turned 50, I was doing a lot of business coaching, combining all those skills that I had brought to that point to help people build their own businesses. So that was the path I was on. During that time, we had 3 children. By that time, all 3 had graduated college. And my middle boy, Peter, had graduated Boston College. And my daughter also graduated Boston College. Our youngest son, Andrew, graduated Bentley. And Peter graduated BC. He had been on the baseball team, had captained that his senior year. He had gone over to Europe to play professional baseball, had come back to Boston, played baseball in the Intercity League. And as, athletes know, they don't really get it out of their blood. So he got a great corporate job, moved to South Boston, which, let's go Boston College. Eagles go straight to South Boston. And was really living a pretty big life, had just had a new girlfriend, and was playing, as I said, in this Intercity League, which was really interesting. He was 27, and this is in 2011. He was really struggling at the bat. And the year before, Pete was not only the MVP of his team, he was MVP of the championship, he was MVP of the league, and he had batted over 400. And I always said my kids were kind of late bloomers, and he really had hit his highest performance level at 27. And then the following year in 2011, he was really struggling at the bat. And in August of 2011, he was hit by a pitch, which normally, fastball coming into a lefty, he would have just whacked that thing right out of the park, and it hit him in the wrist. And he was only hitting like 200 that year. So it led him to an orthopedic guy. And then after Christmas, the orthopedist sent him to a neurologist. And on March 13th, 2012, at 27, Pete asked my husband and I to go in with him because he thought he had a pinched nerve. And we walked out of there with an ALS diagnosis. So as far as my professional life, as you have the different chapters in your life, you develop different skill sets, but it's really those main skills that you bring to either your professional life, your personal life, or the combination of both that really jumped up at that point when Pete asked us to get to work in the world of ALS. So for the past 12 years, that's where I've been. My family has been there, and we continue to work in that field.
I mean, it's not, I'm sure, not an easy thing to go through, but growing up as a athletic parent, a sports parent, you have that kind of community and closeness right away, right?
Well, you just get it,
Yeah.
right? You get when you're faced with a challenge. You've been in games where it's the 9th inning, and you're waiting to hit that home run to win the game, and so you felt up against the wall. This was the most gigantic wall you could ever be up against. But when you have a kid who had been a leader his whole life, And 6 hours after diagnosis shows courage and resiliency that you can't even imagine. Even 12 years later, I still am at that kitchen table with him saying those words. And, honestly, JR, I didn't get the ALS diagnosis. Pete got the ALS diagnosis. So feeling bad for myself as his mother, our family, feeling bad for ourselves, he showed us and told us, nope, we're stopping right here. Basically, this is what we've been doing. We can't look backwards. What are we going to do about it? And the two lines which most people have heard and which still ring to this day, we're going to change the trajectory of this stagnant disease. And what an opportunity we've been given to change the world.
And what an impact you've had, which we'll definitely talk about. I'll give you like my perspective on that time. Pete and I were the same age. We graduated high school the same year. I also played football, hockey, and baseball. So I knew who Pete was. And I remember distinctly when I heard about the diagnosis. And it was kind of like this moment where you're like, wow, like, this is a pretty fragile thing that we have here. But I also remember the response to it, which was amazing. And, you talked about this idea of like having your back against the wall, but having a community around you. Now, one of the reasons that we're chatting is this is the 10-year anniversary of what hopefully all our listeners know. Maybe some of our younger folks don't, but they owe a lot to this, which is the Ice Bucket Challenge. We didn't talk a lot about this, but can you talk about like how that whole thing started?
Sure. So the night of diagnosis, Pete was very clear when I said I was going to journal his journey. And I got out my book and pen that I'm going to start journaling, and he told me, "Nope, Mom, we're not going to do that." He said, "We are going to videotape my journey." Because there's one thing Pete understood, a couple of things he understood, and he combined them all into this, this eloquent speech that he gave our family. He said, look, he goes, "This is a visual disease." He said, "So we're going to videotape me and we're going to journal on Facebook." Now, again, it's 2012. So Facebook was the major platform and video was fairly novel at that time.
Very nice.
And he knew he was 27, a high level athlete, probably in his peak physical, condition. And he knew that this disease was going to take him apart piece by piece. So for the next 2.5 years, we just kept cultivating that community, right? We called them the circles of Pete. So you heard about Pete just because you were in that sports community. Yeah. But, he had been in so many other communities, his grade school, his middle school, there were so many, we called them the circles of Pete, even his friends over in Hamburg, Germany that he played with, all the people he played against in the ACC. He understood the power of all those communities. And so basically we had a following. And during that time, Pete was literally being taken away from us. And during the summer of 2014, I don't think a lot of people understand that Pete was completely paralyzed by then, in a wheelchair. He could no longer eat. He was no longer typing or talking at that time. So everything he was doing was with an eye gazer technology on his computer, moving his mouse and typing. One of the gifts of this disease, which sounds like how could this disease give you any gifts, but I think what it gave Pete and our family is to live in the present, to really understand those cliches that every moment is a gift. So when you live in the present, opportunity will not pass you by because you will be so focused on what's happening and who you're with, and your listening is at a high level that you will see opportunity. So during 2014, the Ice Bucket Challenge had been around the internet for a lot of other causes. And Pete had been mentoring a guy, a rugby player from Iona College that had been diagnosed a year after him. And there's a long story about how the Ice Bucket Challenge came to his Facebook page. Yeah. And he knew the power of Pete. So he called Pete right away and he sent it to him and he said, "Buddy, what do you think?" And Pete wrote 3 words: "This is it." That trajectory change that he saw, that he talked about, the vision he set in 2012, he was waiting for it. And as soon as he saw it, he grabbed hold of it. And that's when he just asked all those circles and all that community to join him and ask them to do it. And that's it. It's as simple as that.
And like, unless you've been somebody who's used a payphone before, and like, you know, I used to call my mom after hockey practice on 1-800-COLLECT, like, hockey's over, pick me up.
That's right.
So like pre-social media people don't quite understand what this meant. How it changed the world.
It changed so many things, JR. So in the world of ALS, I mean, we can talk about what it changed from a financial standpoint, a research, a progress standpoint. But what it changed really importantly is that you have to remember this community of patients, they couldn't communicate, right? They can't communicate. So if you think prior to technology, prior to the internet, you know, how do you make a movement? You make a movement by getting like-minded people with a singular mission to gather and to advocate, right? Prior to 2012, ALS patients couldn't do that because they couldn't pick up the phone. They couldn't write a letter. They couldn't type. So it also opened up a world to this community of patients to start communicating with each other too. So there's so many things that go back to that August of 2014 that today in that same context, today, there are over 1,000 Facebook groups for ALS patients. They go down to as direct as they have book clubs.
Wow.
I mean, so it opened up. So just think about that. 30,000 people that couldn't communicate with each other now can. So many things, you know, we can go into the money and the progress and everything, but it's unbelievable. And here we are celebrating 10 years. And you brought up a great point. The celebration of the 10-year is so important because I think that 10 years ago, you might have been 4, you might have been 8, you might have been 13, but you remember doing it. I don't care because you know what you remember? You remember the people you were with. They were people you loved. You remember, you know, it was a hot August day and you poured ice water over your head. And then you laughed and you felt joy and everybody, you know, that community, that your community was together doing that. And then you got to do something for someone else. So now it's our duty to remind those kids and those teenagers, we need them to pick up the torch here and they need to take it and understand now why they did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, just digging into some of the financial impact. I remember when we first talked, the number was something like a $250 million that was raised for ALS research through the Ice Bucket Challenge, right?
Yeah. So $250 million was raised in 6 weeks in 2014. God. And I was just at in 6 weeks. And interesting and amazingly enough, I was just at an ALS conference in Dallas last week, and it was announced that the money that was raised during Ice Bucket Challenge in the world of research, they have leveraged that. For every dollar, they've leveraged $7. So it has actually created over $1 billion for the world of ALS research.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
What a legacy for Pete and for your family. Now, one thing that we talked about that resonated with me was Pete's like core values. I think you called them affirmations. Mm-hmm. Can you talk about those a little bit? Because I've been thinking about those words since we last spoke.
As I told you, he first articulated them in that context to a group of top student athletes about 4 weeks after he was diagnosed. And I remember standing in the back and I had my antiquated telephone out, a phone taking the video of him back in 2012. And at the end, he said these words, and I thought to myself, they're very simple, but they're so succinct and so powerful. And boy, wouldn't we all be better if we just lived by these words? And I call them an affirmation because I repeat them every morning when I get up every day. So be passionate, live your life in passion. If you're not passionate, you won't be positive. You can't be happy. You just have to get up and give gusto to life. Be genuine. Look, you can term that however you want to put it. Be yourself, be whatever, be your authentic self, be who you are. Don't try to be something that you're not, because you can't be passionate if you're not genuine. But the third thing is not to have an expectation that things are just going to come to you, right? That you're just going to sit back and be passionate and genuine and everything's going to come. No, be hardworking. And what does that mean? That means be productive, and whatever that might be for you. Hardworking doesn't have to be, you have to go in and you have to do your job from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. Be hardworking at being the best you can be. Yeah. Because if you're the best you can be, you'll make others around you rise to be the best they can be. And then the last line really resonated with me, because here he is talking to this group of kids who have achieved as high as you can achieve as being seniors in high school. And he kind of stroked their ego a little bit and just said, but I'm not doing that. I'm not stroking your ego. You're in this room because there are a lot of people that think you're great. So don't ever be afraid to be great. They just are. I still get goosebumps every time I say them. And he was that kid. He walked the walk. He really did live his life by those simple things.
Yeah. And I'll just say it again: be passionate, be genuine, be hardworking, and don't be afraid to be great. Because I think that needs to be on a t-shirt.
They are.
Good.
go to PeteFrates.com.
I love it. I remember we bonded the first time we talked. I was in my office and I had the sign behind me that said, "Nobody cares, work harder." And you were like, "I love that."
I love that. Love that.
Well, I think one thing that I think is a running theme in my life, but in your life and in Pete's life, has been athletics and sports and the power of sports. Looking back now, what role did his background as an athlete and, a great athlete play in this whole journey for you guys and for him?
It's so profound. First of all, Pete was given innate gifts as a child, and we knew that. And we used to look at him and go, "What are we going to do with this kid?" I mean, we had 3 kids, but we were like looking at him. Now we understand. But being an athlete took those innate gifts, and he just elevated him. He understood everything about sports mechanically, right? Yeah. But he understood the intrinsic. He understood that team and everything that was important to be team and how you succeed by being a team. And yes, wins and losses. Pete was as competitive as anyone, but he also understood what real team meant, what it meant to humanity, what it meant to the people sitting next to him. And it played an enormous role in the context of Ice Bucket Challenge. I'll tell you a story that happened as parents getting this diagnosis. And those of you that are parents will understand this. Our first reaction was, where do we go? Who do we talk to? What can we do? The who, what, where, why, we were just totally ruminating about all these things. And we worked our way into this in Washington, D.C. with a group of advocates. And this group of advocates that had been in the fight a lot longer than we had were talking about the people around the table putting up their own money to take an ad out in the Wall Street Journal because nobody understood our disease. And the money was needed so bad that that's what they wanted to do. And my husband spoke right up and said, well, Pete is an athlete. And he has a lot of connections in the world of sports. And I have to be honest with you, they looked at us like we had 10 heads. And they looked at us and they said, no. We have to go to the intelligentsia. We have to stay in the world of academia. That's where we're going to get this out. And honestly, John and I left there thinking, this back in 2012, we just thought to ourselves, Pete's going to do this his way.
Right.
And those are his connections. So when, Pete asked people to join him, who were the first people that joined him? All those athletes, from the kids that were on his Little League team to the professional athletes that he either knew or he knew someone who knew them. They were the ones that took the Ice Bucket Challenge and elevated it and led the charge. It's funny because people ask me about that month, and I say that first week was really Boston media. Yes, we had been on social media, but traditional media kicked in with Boston media. Well, if you think about it, what surrounded Boston media was all the athletes doing it, right?
Totally.
And then it went to national media. But that was a week after all the athletes started doing it. So sports has everything to do with this journey and everything to do with our journey. And today, there are relationships that we have developed over the past 12 years that people who are still with us and still by our side. And I think that will bring me to our August 1st event that we're having next week. So who steps up with the 10-year anniversary but the Redsox? That iconic picture of our family out in left field. They said there's no better way to commemorate that 10-year anniversary, but let's have you guys back. So next week on August 1st, we're heading back into Fenway Park. And who's going to be by our side? Well, who's going to be by our side is Sam Kennedy. Who's going to be by our side is Matt Ryan, who was a friend of Pete's at Boston College. Who's going to be by our side? But the great Ray Bork. We have videos from others. And here they are, still by our side. And there's nothing like team. When you don't have to tell athletes what it means. They know what it means. They know when one of their teammates is in trouble or is challenged. They know how to lift them and lift those around them, and we'll be forever grateful.
We talk a lot about, obviously athletes, like we're selling athletes to the business world every single day. We talk about resiliency, competitiveness, coachability, growth mindset. But the thing I always lead with is they know what it means to be on a team. They know what it means to play for the name on the front of their uniform more than the back. And I think the Ice Bucket Challenge and Pete's journey and how everybody stepped up is a great example of that kind of selflessness and accountability to other people.
Exactly.
That was a huge lesson for everybody. So you got the August 1st Fenway, and then August 2nd, there's another documentary coming out, right? On
yes,
ESPN.
ESPN has been, and it's going to be pretty comprehensive. It's not only going to be an update on our family, and everybody can see Lucy at 10 years old.
Oh my God. Who I saw, by the way, throw a pitch.
Yes.
The first pitch at the Red Sox game.
Yes.
And she clearly got her dad's athletic.
She's playing softball, and ESPN went to one of her softball games. So that should be in there. Also, August 4th will be the ESPN documentary. It's going to end with the August 1st. They're coming out to film August 1st. So it'll be right up to date, but it's going to be comprehensive. It's not just going to be an update on our family, but they have gone out and talked to the different entities that have been impacted by the Ice Bucket Challenge. So of course, they're talking to the researchers and the clinicians in the world of ALS that will tell all the progress that's been made. They also have headed to Facebook. So they should have some pretty funny anecdotal Facebook stories, but also talking about the disruption in philanthropy that the Ice Bucket Challenge produced. And I'm sure there'll be some other pieces in there that I'm not aware of, because they interviewed John and I about 5 months ago. So they've been working on this for a while. So we're really honored about that. I have been doing some international media, because, we think about the Ice Bucket Challenge, and yes, it blew up. We're at ground zero in Boston of it. Yeah. But I mean, this was worldwide. Totally. I have traveled since 2015. I have been, people say, well, where have you gone? I said, well, let's see, I've gone to Australia and did a tour of Australia, because They raised $17 million for MND, which is what they call ALS in Australia. I've been to Mumbai, India twice. I've been all over Europe. We had Brazilian TV, Colombian TV come to our houses. This was so needed. And that's what I bring from all this, is that this was a community of people who were living in the shadows, who were suffering this, first of all, the diagnosis. It starts right at diagnosis when they tell you you have 3 to 5 years to live, and it's 100% fatal. I mean, can you imagine hearing that? It's 100% fatal. I heard it, but it wasn't me.
Yeah.
It was my kid that was hearing this. So this brought life into this community to stand up and be heard. And here we are 10 years later. I'll just tell you a quick story from last week. I met 2 women who are in their mid-30s, who are in wheelchairs and have been given this diagnosis. Well, they're having the greatest time. One girl has 200,000 followers on TikTok. She is a riot. She's got the most positive attitude. She infuses humor into her journey, makes it so compelling and relatable. I was joking with her saying, we're just passing this social media, baton off to you. But they were telling me that in September, they have 40 women who are under the age of 40 who are all flying into Cape Cod to spend a weekend together.
Oh, amazing.
I mean, this is what, breathing life into a community is. And the thing that came out from last week, which was repeated a number of times, is that the researchers and the clinicians, yes, the end game is that we want a cure for this. But right now, the drugs that are in the pipeline are going to be extending life.
Yeah.
So instead of that 5 year prognosis, hopefully we're going to get to a 10 to 20 year prognosis. We're trying to make ALS a livable disease. Those are words that in 2012 were not even available to us. And I got asked one question, and they said, how do you define hope? And I said, well, I'm not going to, I know what hope is. I said, I can truly tell you what hope is because I know what hopelessness is. Because that's what I felt the day Pete was diagnosed. No treatment, no cure. Don't come back for 3 months. We have nothing for you. We're hearing the same prognosis today, but we're saying we have over 80 drugs and therapies in the pipeline right now. We have 2 FDA approved treatments right now that have happened with Ice Bucket Challenge money being their catalyst.
Wow.
We have doubled the number of clinics that can service ALS patients. So, you can have a movement, and every athlete knows this. You can have a team, but unless there's results, what good is the movement? What good is the
scoreboard?
Team? What good is it, right? So, yes, that movement has produced the most amazing results. Not quite where we want to be. That's why we need you to come back and join us.
Yes.
But it's amazing what community and team can do.
And that's why we wanted to get you on tape, Nancy. And I, again, like, I don't think people realize that it's been 10 years because it feels like yesterday, and I'm sure you can relate to that.
In some respects, it feels like yesterday. Starting to do a lot of media, it feels like it was 100 years ago, right? So, I'm 10 years older. My grandkids are 10 years older, but that is now the point: is that these kids are older, and let's tell them. And you know what, JR, is. Awareness is an amazing thing. You can call it whatever you want. Awareness, marketing, branding, right? It all comes back to the same thing. It's just making people aware of your product, but most importantly, of your story. And now that's what's happening. There are more people that are being affected by this disease. There are more people that are realizing that they're being affected by this disease. So let's keep telling the story. And if you want, let's keep pouring ice water over your head.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think my takeaway from this is, the money that is being raised, the Pete Frates Foundation, everything you guys are doing is about hope.
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's if there's a cause better than that, I don't know it. So it's really important that people understand what this disease is, what it does to people, and what can be done to change that.
That's right.
And that's what it's all about, right?
It's absolutely right. And, being specific with your audience, with athletes, I don't want to single any specific sports, but it's a dirty little secret in a lot of sports that a lot of their players get ALS.
Yeah.
And now that's coming out of the shadows. Now we're hearing about hockey, football, soccer, rugby, baseball, track, that there is all of a sudden you're like, wow, I know a lot of athletes that have gotten this.
Yeah.
So we just take care of ourselves, right? Too.
100%. So August 1st, Fenway, I'll be there.
Great.
August 2nd, you got the BBC podcast,
Right.
which has a little bit bigger of a following than Merchants of Change, I think.
Oh, well, just wait. Just stick at it.
Speaking of awareness. And then, of course, the documentary on August 4th. Nancy, thank you so much for sharing your story and Pete's story and your family story and the ALS story. I think this is we're just getting started, and I'm excited that we're gonna help raise that level of hope on that scoreboard, because that's what it's all about.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on, and if anybody really wants to see Pete's story, and we'll be posting the ESPN documentary on it, it's petefrates.com, and we have a great team that works on that website so that people and his story can be shared.
100%.
So thank you.
Thank you so much.